I'm Adam Andreassen, CEO at Family and Children's, and we just wrapped up the most amazing conversation with Toneille Bent. Toneille is our Executive Vice President of Culture and Engagement here at Family and Children's Services, or FCS as we call it. And the conversation really ranged in a lot of different directions, but we really focused in on the humanity and identity that comes with being an immigrant and an Okie, both. Here to talk about the ways in which she brings her story to life in a day-to-day basis, but also how the fear and uncertainty of today's time is affecting her, is affecting our system, and what we can take away from that from a humanity standpoint. This is not a political conversation we had today. It is a lovely, heartwarming conversation about identity and changing times, and so we hope you'll join us for this conversation. So Toneille, I've known you for a little bit more than a year now.
Long time.
We've worked together for almost that entire time. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit who you are and how we came to get acquainted to begin with.
Absolutely. I'm Toneille Bent. Of course, I serve as EVP of Culture and Engagement happily here at FCS. Who am I? My goodness, that's a layered question. I hope we get to some of that
We'll
today.
spend some time on that one. What do you do here?
Yeah. I think that what I do here is really, hopefully, help staff to feel seen and heard and to give them an experience or support an experience for them that is healthy, is inviting, is inclusive, and one where they feel seen and heard. And
your title here, what is your title and how long have you been at FCS?
I'm Executive Vice President of Culture and Engagement, and I've been here June 17th was a year.
And you came from a similar industry. Tell us a little bit about how you came here and what appealed to you about coming to FCS.
Yeah, so I was looking for an opportunity. I used to work for a national education nonprofit. Prior to that, I was a teacher. So education has really been the space I've been in for over a decade, going on 15, 20 years. And was looking for a new opportunity and have a sorority sister actually on the board. And she shared with me that you had just joined and we're looking to kind of expand the equity focus, the equity work here at the agency. So that's how I learned of the opportunity. Went through a marathon first interview.
I thought that 17 interviews was the right number, but apparently HR is telling me that might have overdone it just a little bit.
It was a whirlwind day. I actually asked, I said, are you sure this is for me? I'm an in-town candidate.
And that, I think that speaks to how much care we want to put into bringing someone into our system. Yeah. And it's been such a joy getting to know you over this last year. One of the things that we knew a little bit a year ago, but are experiencing all the more since then, it's just a high change environment, and a lot of that change is affecting lots of humans.
Yeah.
And we knew that would be something that affected our clients and our staff because of the times we're in. But when you came in, compared to where it is now, just high level, I'm not trying to go political, but high level, what are the biggest high level shifts you're seeing in how our staff and clients are trying to navigate all the changing expectations on where our values are and what we're expected to do, and even some of the legal stuff? What's that been like navigating it just as a leader in our system for this kind of stuff?
So you asked me about all of the changes, right? I mean, how to capture that. We could do a whole sit down on that.
And I asked you for the 30-second, not fair.
Right,
but what is it like?
Yeah. It's been exciting. At once it's been a little confounding, but it's been very exciting and gratifying because as I personally am navigating a lot of the climate and what's going on out there internally, and as it pertains to my role, I get to support people through their questions and their needs. So that has been really, really gratifying to me. But every day it's a new headline. Every day it's a new executive order. Every day it's a new kind of tactic that has our staff in question about our future as an agency at times, that has them in question about how to support our clients who are in various people groups, right? We serve our community. So how to support the people groups that are impacted by these orders is the question of the day.
I mean, quite frankly, not that this is, we're the least of those affected by some of these things because broadly speaking, me more than you, I don't have to worry about what they're going to come do to me per se, but the amount of legal reviews and how careful you can be. And we're not just talking about like things in the equity and inclusion space. We're also talking about contract changes.
Yeah.
The entire environment we're in is one in which we're trying to reassure everybody else while avoiding fear ourselves,
Yes.
which is sort of nonsensical to even say it out loud that way.
The thing about leadership, right? Leadership is an art because you have to at times suspend your own humanity while not being insensitive to other people's. And it's just, how do you navigate the policies, the tactics?
Sure.
What are the ways to keep people engaged, to keep them cared for, heard, but not overdo it and still stick to the business, if that makes sense?
It does. And I was just thinking, shocker, no one is successfully suspending their humanity because we all bring ourselves into our work.
Yeah.
And it's not just those we serve. It's not just broad numbers. I feel like, there was some research years ago about when they were doing appeals for countries where people were starving.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that when they showed a group full of starving kids, the number of people that would pick up the phone and give money was less than when they showed a kid.
Yeah.
A person. Because a person, that's an individual. That's something I can take action on. That's something I can speak to. Broadly speaking, a group of people, which should be a bigger deal to us, there's something in our human psyche that groups that like it's less significant. And I feel like some of that comes to bear here when we think about the humanity of people who are living through so many fears and so many uncertainties right now. And yet when we broadly think of it, it can desensitize us to what's happening.
You think it's overwhelm? Because I think that can be overwhelm as well.
Yeah.
You can look at a group in that photo of kids and think, well, I can't impact that many at once. If you start with one, I think maybe it feels more accessible.
There's a phrase I've heard, and I actually had to go Google it a while back when I heard it, because I've heard it, but I didn't know exactly how it was used until I went and looked it up. It's about being othered.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if you could share a little bit, like, what does that mean when people say, I got othered? What does that mean?
Marginalized. Your difference is highlighted in a negative way, whether inadvertently or deliberately, right? So if you are the person that's the outlier or of difference in the room, whether it be opinion, whether it be identity, whatever it might be, that there can be a pushing aside or minimization. I mean, you could put any number of words to
again, while leaning into the humanity of this and purposely avoiding the politics of it as much as possible, othering seems like we're in a sorting exercise as a country and as a world right now. And I'm not exactly sure what's driving that sorting, but it is causing a lot of people to be sorted, sometimes in categories that aren't fair, and other times in which the category is fair and even embraced, but the judgment of those categories varies. And I think that's something, Toneille, I don't know a soft entry point to this.
Yeah.
That's something you have experience with, not just as a leader, but you are an immigrant.
I am.
And I'm wondering if you would share a little bit of that, because I want to make sure that as we're having this conversation today, we're having it with an individual, enough with a high level.
Yeah.
What are we talking about, and what is your story as an immigrant to this country?
So I'm really glad you're saying what's your story, Toneille, right? What my story is. So this is not the immigrant story at large. This is mine. So I want to qualify that. So I came here when I was a tiny little girl. I was almost 4, from Jamaica, and moved right here to Tulsa, Oklahoma with my family, which was my parents and my brother. And we brought also with us our nanny from Jamaica. I can talk about that more. But, I think that what I want to get at is that my story is individual, and that when we hear immigrant nowadays, it brings up such an imagery. And I wanted to sit and talk with you about my experience to kind of help bring empathy and a desire to learn more.
So when you moved, how many people moved at once?
Yeah, so it was the 4 of us and our nanny, 5.
So 5
family.
of you,
yeah.
and then I'm assuming that Jamaican culture is pretty collectivist.
Very.
And
everybody's in your business.
And did you come find? Does Tulsa have a big Jamaican community?
Big enough for being in Tulsa. So I'll give you a little more backstory.
Yeah.
My father went to college here. He came from Jamaica, went to college here, graduated, and went back to Jamaica with no intention of coming back here. And things got tough politically, economically. And it was my mother who said, we've got to make a move. So they came to Tulsa, sponsored in by my father's college roommate's family. So our entry point was Chicago, Geneva, Illinois. Okay. Came here. And over time, we curated a community of islanders. And you would be very surprised at the number of islanders that are here. So
is that still a big part of your social and support system?
Not as much, not formally, right? Okay. So the way that community came to be for us was in a couple of ways. We were the first of our family, extended family, to get here to the States, and then others kind of slowly followed. Sure. But my father started a cricket team in 1983. With that, right, cricket, this, to me, very boring sport, it curated this group of expats from everywhere. Islanders, India, Pakistanis, persons from Scotland, Australia, I mean, you name it.
Sure.
So when my father started the cricket team in Tulsa in 1983, I didn't know as a little girl when I was listening to my dad have all these conversations about the cricket conference and going to the cricket pitch every weekend in North Tulsa is where it was. How boring, right? I didn't understand that I was picking up so much from my dad about curating a network, about being influential, effecting change. This was more than a sporting endeavor. It was really community building. It was civic. It was, my dad fundraised. Every year, the cricket team had a booth at Mayfest, and they'd fundraise, and my mom and other ladies would cook island food and sell it. They got food handlers permits to do that. But one story, which I think is really, really cool, my father wanted to host a cricket invitational, a tournament in Tulsa, and Southern Hills Country Club, he had to go and appeal to them to use their grounds and to reconfigure the grounds in order to have the cricket pitch put in. So if you know anything about cricket, it's this one lane kind of with a batsman and a pitch bowler at the end. So they run back and forth. Well, they had to install that. But my dad didn't have a membership at Southern Hills. My dad is a black man. For years, Southern Hills wasn't admitting him, okay? So he got two of his doctor friends, one who was Australian, the other who's from Scotland, dear men. One has passed away. And they went in together as a trio and got Southern Hills to give them the opportunity to reconfigure their grounds, pour that pitch, and have the tournament there.
Wow.
That story to me, as I was the other day chairing the Pinnacle Awards for the YWCA, came back to me over and over again as I had to create inroads and use my network and fundraise and drum up business for this event that honors women in the city. And I thought, I really learned a lot watching my daddy. I learned so much, and there's more. My dad's my hero. I adore him. And I just, it taught me so much about leadership, boldness, purpose.
The things we absorb from parents and those around us are probably way more important. I got to remember that my mansplaining speeches to my kids is probably never going to register, one, because they're not listening, and two, because it's not near as impactful as whatever is the absorbed things from our environment. I think that's my take when I'm hearing is like, your dad taught you best because you didn't know it was a lesson.
Exactly. I'd listen to him talk cricket. It was like another job, but he talked about integrity. They handled money. They had elections. They had like a set of officers for this club. They went.
He kind of built a culture.
He did. And they went across states to play, right? He had a vision, and that team is still going, but not, of course, with his age group. But they still play. A lot of younger guys are out there still playing.
That's incredible.
It really is, yeah. So.
Did you grow up from the very beginning feeling like on that range of outsiders, pun intended, Tulsa, to like, what was your sense growing up of how much different versus same you were in this area?
So, it was a mix of feeling very at home and then very other at times. So it's kind of this
back and forth.
And what that looked like was because I had such safety in my home and such an awareness of culture in my home, including at one time being a multi-generational home because my grandmother came and lived with us. My auntie then came and lived with us. Cousins would come and live with us. So we had a really strong presence in our home of our culture and our family. And we always shared our culture with others and invited other people's cultures into our home too. So there was this mix that made you realize diversity was real, right? And it was rich, it was accessible, it was fine. But then I'd go to school, and I'll give you one very stark example that showed me, you're not like us. So I was probably in about second grade, going to a little church school at the time, and my parents wanted private school for me because that's what they had been through in the islands. Sent me to this school, Christmas play. They made up a role for me. I was the innkeeper's wife. We never hear of her anywhere else. So the line was, bring her, Mary, to the inn. She will be more comfortable there, right? So the way I said it, because I had a little accent at the time, was, bring her to the inn, she'll be more comfortable there. Teacher calls me out and she says, that's not how we say it. It's comfortable. And I said, that's not how I say it. I was probably 5 or 6.
Oh, and now you're uncomfortable.
Right. That indicated to me immediately there's something different that's wrong. In my little mind, I can remember that day. We don't understand that, and I had to defend.
It's embarrassing socially.
Very.
And do you look at that and say, okay, that's an outlier, or was that a repeated pattern? Whether you call it passive aggressive or microaggressions or just mean, it certainly is something that can register in a child's mind. How much of that is what you shared with me as an isolated example versus that it was a regular, like what was the frequency of something like this?
So it came in different ways. Maybe not as criticism, it came as query. It came as imposition and telling me what my identity was. So it came in the form of, I would have other Black children say to me, are you mixed? Why do you talk that way? Why do you talk so white? And then white folks would say to me, you're not really Black though, you're Jamaican, right? So it was
said like a compliment probably too.
That, or maybe just kind of them trying to understand. I had children in elementary school, can I touch your hair? Because I had little pigtails and naturally textured hair at the time. And I didn't know better. So I would say, sure. I'm 5, I'm 6, I'm 7. Now we know you do not touch people's person. Right? But I've always been educating people, I think. And while it wasn't necessarily always offensive, it became tiresome that people felt they could question my identity or impose their notions.
I kind of remember the first time, it was an aha, this was a few years out of college, and the notion that while my curiosity about diversity and understanding people better was good, it was not their job to teach me. Because I was speaking with a room full of people, but it was this older Black gentleman in my profession who essentially shared how annoyed he was at the entire set of exercises, and I was really surprised. But the point was, why is it our job to educate you? Even as it was, I think, good for me to be curious and want to know, there is a fine line between, hey, I'm curious to Toneille, this person who I have a relationship with, and literally who agreed to sit down and visit with me because I'm curious. That's one thing. But to assume that people's identity is a thing that now it is their responsibility to teach and convey. We're not even talking about race and culture at this point. We're talking about humanity and relationship. How much of it is something that if there's something different about me, I should educate you on, versus that our general awareness of each other, there's got to be other roots to that.
So I kind of have a mixed feeling about that because I've been an educator by trade. I've been educating folks since I was a kid. I invite curiosity, but I think that sometimes that curiosity can border on imposition and ownership and that othering. And you become a spectacle, or kind of like you put something under a microscope like you're in a science lab. That's demeaning. And there's opportunity. Like, for example, for me, my learning took place just being present and being in spaces of difference. Right? In a school system where I didn't see a lot of me. I certainly didn't see other Jamaican kids, but I saw a few Black children in the space I was in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, right? So I had to learn how to understand and navigate spaces.
And I would
of
have to
difference.
assume that intent matters, because if you as a child, I would guess if you discerned genuine curiosity and that someone was trying to see you and recognize you, you probably would have welcomed that curiosity in ways that if the judgment came packaged in the question, I would guess that the intent matters in this sense.
It absolutely does. I mean, again, people don't know what they don't know. So there's that understanding as well. I just think that when you are someone who is in a marginalized or underrepresented group in certain spaces, people feel they have the right to scrutinize or to question you in ways that feel unfair.
I want to get back to your story some, but
Yeah.
I have this other question that I'm also wanting to pick at, and that is, okay, we understand that it's not any person's job to educate someone else about them,
Yeah.
right? We also know that in a culture like America that has famously and thankfully welcomed immigration from all over the world for hundreds of years, there's going to be a lot of differences that if we don't ask questions, if we don't lean into why is that, we will never know and understand, and we'll just walk over people, and vice versa. Like, what are your thoughts about in our society, in our culture, how do we say, number one, it's not your job, Toneille, well, it is actually your job to educate everybody, but it's not everybody's job to educate somebody about who they are, what the differences are, and yet how should someone lean into that if they're genuinely curious? Because it seems like most people are afraid to ask, so they just sort of avoid.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think I have a perspective that some folks might argue with and say no, because I will sit down and have those conversations. But I think one really great thing for me, it was just the proximity that I got to have to people who, even though they might have been expats or other internationals, they were still different from me, but I was in their home, I ate their food. People came to ours, they ate our food. That's one way to kind of learn without the formality of dialogue and asking questions, right? That's one way, getting proximate.
I want you to continue,
Sure,
but did you ask others then, if you were in America, like, what is this? Did you ask them questions?
I don't remember asking a lot of questions because I was always observant from little. My mother would tell me I would just look people up and down and make a decision if I wanted to go further or not. I mean, from tiny.
Sure.
And so I always was curious, but I would watch and I would try things. And, I didn't have a choice though, Adam, but to be curious because I was in so many spaces where nobody was me or reflected my culture or experience. But to answer your question directly, I think there are ways to inspire conversation that is healthy. And let me put it on this notion, belonging, right? In the equity space, we talk about diversity, belonging, inclusion, equity, access, justice, those types of words. Belonging is one I've been kind of thinking about, right? You all made me feel very welcome when I got here a year ago and some months or some weeks. But you didn't know me. Nobody on that team knew me well. So you can figure me out over time. You can observe me. You can understand, oh, Toneille's introverted, that kind of thing. Or Toneille comes alive in XYZ kind of space. But there's some responsibility, I think, that I bear to help create understanding with you all about me and vice versa. So it's not just one directional. And I think that that's the same with understanding each other culturally. There's opportunity for folks to invite others into their space. But the defensiveness about that, I think, is really around the harm that's been done by virtue of people being different.
Can I ask, again, I'm going to jump around with your permission, but you're an executive vice president, Family and Children's.
Yeah.
You have an extensive network of people throughout this community, leaders, people of influence in all walks of life. You're an immigrant, but you've not been affected by all this stuff as it hits the news, right?
Oh, my goodness, have I?
I mean, tell me.
So, just because I'm an empathetic person, of course, it hurts and it hits. But I will tell you another bit of my journey is I am a Spanish degreed person. I was a middle school Spanish teacher for many years. The Latin community, while I do not co opt their experience and their identity, certainly, they've invited me in, right? My first job out of college was working with Hilti Latin America, supporting distributors in the Caribbean, Latin America, South America, Central America. And I feel so hurt for what I see in the labeling that's happening. And I just want to qualify there is criminal behavior and there's criminalization of people. And I see that there's a blanketness in some of the ways that folks in that group in particular are being characterized and dealt with. And it does hit me. And it hits me from the immigrant perspective because there are so many reasons, so many pathways, so much that goes into the emotion and the mental state of somebody who's a transplant. And that insensitivity is really hard for me to see and not be hit by.
Can I push a little bit further?
Yeah.
I feel like I have seen, as the news plays out in real time, I feel like I've seen you experience fear for yourself. And it doesn't matter rational or not, doesn't matter how reasonable or not, I feel like I've seen you experience fear over the last year.
You have. You have.
Can you share?
Yeah. So I'm naturalized. Here's the tears. And when I see, sweeps of people being detained, and it was stated, oh, we're going for the criminal element. The persons who are undocumented are here illegally, and citizens who are Latin in identity are being swept up. And oh, we can't bring them back. Sorry, it's an error, but we can't correct it. Those kinds of things that I see in the news. I think, what about me? What about if there is all of a sudden this move to denaturalize, which has been talked about, to denaturalize people, and they're hanging that on civil kind of infractions? What if there's a finger slip? What if there is a clerical error and my family and I are swept up in that and we are told, sorry, we can't reverse it, and all of a sudden, life changes in one fell swoop. I came here at 3, almost 4. My mother and father were in their 30s. They're now in their 70s. My brother came at 9 months. He's now, 47 with a son and a wife. What if? And more of my family who are naturalized, who did things the right way, but because someone sees us in a particular classification. And again, I want to clarify, the headline is, we could look to denaturalize for civil infractions or maybe criminal. We have none of those. But if there's a finger slip or just somebody's motivated one day, that could impact me. And I'm a Black woman. So I want to say that also is a part of my identity that has me concerned.
And I think the thing I want to just keep reiterating, I wish that I didn't have to reiterate this, but we're not trying to talk politics right now, but we are talking about the human experience as we live in a world in which uncertainty is now the rule.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that occurs to me is like you have all of these different identities that are so excited and interested and celebration worthy, and yet some of them, as you noted, can mix up with others if we're talking about how do I judge and how do I get judged and what are the visual cues that would make somebody think I'm a thing. And I remember not so long ago when this news was just hitting with our staff, and there were people talking about, I'm Indian, Native American, and yet I'm worried that my grandchild is going to be perceived as Latino and scooped up. Like those are the types of questions and fears that people are experiencing right now. And I hear you saying, hey, look, I could get mistaken for something that shouldn't be judged to begin with, but now a thing that should be this celebrating, like, look at all the different things that informed who I am today, becomes the thing to be concealed or that makes you afraid of getting confused with somebody.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk about politics, and I know we're not trying to transgress those grounds, but people are what I'm focused on. And it becomes political, right? The policies that in fact impact people and harm people. So it's hard to not go that direction. But I just want you to know that I'm always focused on the human element of this, right? And that will be always first and foremost. I was the child that I remember this clearly. I came home one day in tears, and my father said, "What is wrong? Why are you crying?" I said, "Daddy, my friend had a fight with her mom, and I'm just so upset." And he's like, "Toneille, I know you love your friend, but you can't take on everything for everybody. It will bring you down."
Sure.
And I grapple with that to this day, right? As this Gen Xer now with gray hair who still wants to fix things for people. Our staff included, right? And I can't. I can't.
What are you
everything.
doing? Because again, fixing,
Yeah.
obviously not on the menu.
Yeah.
But how are you approaching this for yourself and for others? So start with the oxygen mask on yourself first and then to others. But how are you coping? How are you dealing with this?
Yeah. I've had to take stock of when I'm not dealing well and when I'm too inundated. So the last couple weekends, I've gotten back into what I love, which is live music, dance, movement. There was a Caribbean festival, ironically, a couple weekends ago, and I went and saw old friends and just was able to be in that vibe. There was a reggae fest that used to be here in town for many, many years. It was big, and I would go every weekend. And, that was from my childhood up into my 20s that ran. So this was kind of reminiscent of that. So yeah, dance, movement. I went to a hip hop exhibit. I'm a music head. Hip hop exhibit this weekend. I think movement really is key. But
is it distraction? Is it finding something stimulating for joy? What are you getting? Other than great music, which I want to know all about too.
It does take my mind off of it for a while. I deliberately told myself, detach. You're taking in too much. Because I do. I watch it constantly. I watch a number of different outlets and, social media platforms to keep myself informed, because I fear or I feel that if I'm not informed, I'm being irresponsible because I don't know what else to do to help.
And all of us take in more information in a week than what previous generations, especially 100 plus years ago, would have taken on in a year or more.
100%.
I mean, there's all that kind of thing where like nothing in our wiring presupposes the news cycle, the 24/7. It's what I've heard some podcasters call, sort of like the journey to the bottom of the brainstem. Essentially, how fast and quick can we get in there and stay there and make you keep the term doom scrolling, just like scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, because what else is there? So I think I hear you talking in that context of breaking out of it. There is some escape, but it's less about what you're turning away from and more of, if I turn into those things that bring me joy, they're still waiting for me. Is that?
Absolutely. And I've really kind of leaned into that over the last few weekends. I did a spa day one weekend. This weekend I was with my folks. I'm a writer too, so just journaling and kind of getting into that space, even reading novels. So that I'm a doctoral student last year. So one more year to go.
But another joyful escape, just a bunch of schoolwork, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
But that meant obligatory reading. So I've been picking up novels and just reading for my own enrichment again, which has been
great.
Reading? Oh my goodness. I am reading an author, Kennedy Ryan. She's a Black woman romance writer. I'm reading stuff on leadership. I'm getting into podcasts, and I just listen to a little bit of everything. Just here and there, you name it.
So shifting gears, but staying on the same kind of topic. Yeah. You, of course, have been touched by this. You've been you felt vulnerable, you feel fearful, all those things. And then there's the other piece of this, though, is that you as the executive vice president of a system that can float the idea of a podcast to the CEO, we talk, you're here, you have a voice. There is a lot of privilege in that.
Lots.
And yet I know you well enough to know you're not telling me the story because you want everybody to know. You're telling the story because you want your story to inform, encourage. Talk to me a little bit about why you felt your story was something that could help others?
I hoped it could help others. You know, when the statement came out about services to persons who are undocumented recently from the Department of Health and Human Services. And it was titled the way it was, with illegal aliens in the language. I said, what can I do? I said, all right, I'm going to sit down and hopefully get to tell my story. And that's when I raised the idea of giving a perspective of an immigrant that is not what I think is prominent, and hopefully humanizing, like I said, the emotional, mental piece of being someone of difference in this country. Even though I've been here the bulk of my life, I'm always in this liminal or in-between space of what it means to be here and who I am, because of how I grew up. And I just wanted to humanize the image of immigrants.
What is the mental health impact of the last year plus?
That's a great question. I believe firmly in therapy, and I do not mind saying that. I invest in it. I go to therapy, and I actually started therapy in 2013. I was going through some issues and was on a grief journey, really. I'd gone through a lot of loss and never stopped during the points of those losses to really grieve deeply. And just one day got up and was trying to go somewhere and realized I can't get dressed, I can't go, I can't move.
Snuck up on you?
Yeah. And I had been feeling this detachment. Like I'd feel like I was floating outside of myself. I'd be present, but it was like I was watching myself and I couldn't connect. So I started therapy then and was told.
How long ago was that?
2013.
Okay.
And was told, and I was in a period of unemployment at the time, and I was told I was dealing with anxiety and depression. So that began my mental health journey. Did that surprise you? It did. But it also gave me relief because I could understand, oh my.
Why surprise and why relief?
Well, I didn't ever expect it to be me, right? I always dealt with things. I was, happy-go-lucky. I would hang out, have fun. I lived a great, life. I didn't stigmatize it, but I just didn't think it would hit me. And then to have a definition for that detached feeling, that inability to connect with experiences and spaces I was in, I was like, oh, that's a relief to know, right? And the way that I dealt with mine beyond therapy, at the time I was heavy into running and all that, believe it or not, but that was my outlet at the time. And it really helped me out. But since that time, that's maintenance for me. It's self-care for me.
So you've been intentional about your mental health since 2013.
I have.
Does it come back around? Is it intersecting? What is the effect now?
So I can recognize when I'm taking a dip, and I know what to do to kind of help myself through. First thing I do is acknowledge it. And then I say, okay, what do I need? Is it music? Is it movement? Is it quietness? Is it to sit still and just process? Is it connection with someone that I trust? What is it? And of course, my therapy appointments. But these days that are happening right now around us, you asked me the impact on me as far as my mental health. I would say that the most that I've seen is maybe some irritability, but not a complete dip. Maybe moments when I'm sad and there's some tears and I feel like I can't do anything about it, a feeling of helplessness, but it's not despair, if that makes sense. So I rebound pretty quickly. I think frustration is a piece of it, and that's, I know, more maybe emotional. But I've really learned to kind of figure out when I'm going low.
What would you say to someone who says, why would I go to therapy to feel more vulnerable when that's all I'm inundated by? And you just said yourself, I go do things that are joyful and other things.
Yeah.
Why should I go lean into a thing that could make me feel more vulnerable, more upset, more like, why would I do that if I'm already feeling all these things in this environment that make me afraid?
Brene Brown, our friend, I know you're a fan.
I'm going to meet her one day. I'm going to call her friend
right? Now. Yeah. She talks about vulnerability as strength, and I believe that. I wholly lean into that. So when I go to therapy, it's not a scary place or a place that brings me down. It's a place sometimes of accountability. It's a place where I can process without bias, where I'll get some real talk from someone who's not in my everyday, who can be more objective because I can be very hard on me and I can just ruminate over a thing over and over and over. And, that experience helps me sort it out. So those are some reasons, but it doesn't take me down. Vulnerability to me is not an uncomfortable place.
I think it was Daniel Pink, great author, has written some great stuff. I follow him on Instagram, and I think everybody should. But I think it was him that talked about some research where they basically assessed what changed in someone's assessment of someone when they showed vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of cultures, it's human nature to conceal vulnerability, but when moments of vulnerability were expressed or displayed, and this is sort of interesting, I don't know how salient it is, but people were much more likely to say they liked someone after they displayed vulnerability. It seems to be some sort of human nature of, if I would display vulnerability, I'm liked better.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, somehow or other, we're wired differently to protect that thing, that wonder of wonders could actually lead to us getting the care, the outreach, the approachability that would come with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, we're in a culture that teaches you not to be vulnerable, right? And let's talk about like grind culture and, the notion is so many people are type A and driven and I don't do that touchy-feely stuff. Well, I live there. I mean, that's what my work is, if you want to look at it that way. There is a business case for the work that I do, right? So there is strategy to it. There are tactics to it. It does have its foundation in research and it's something that matters and it's concrete in some ways, but it's also really kind of touchy-feely nebulous at other times. And so I live in that. That doesn't make me uncomfortable. And I kind of look on sometimes and I'm like, so you don't want to have that conversation, but what's behind that? Like, why don't you want to go there, leader A? Why don't you want to touch that space? Who told you that was wrong? Or what happened to make you close that off and just stick to the task, the business? Right? So we're conditioned that way, I think.
So when you think about your story, everything that brought you here today and where we are right now, are there other aspects or vignettes of things that you thought about coming into today that you thought might be helpful or at least was on your heart to talk about?
Yeah, I just hope to increase understanding. Anywhere that I go, anything that I do, one of the things that I think I've been able to do really well is sit with people who aren't like me and they feel seen and heard. Sit with people who are like me and they feel seen and heard. It's just something that I really pride myself on being able to do and to find connection. So my hope is for people to hear me and to make connections and to say, I really want to kind of, if they need to, reframe the notion of when somebody is a transplant to a place, when somebody has come here from their homeland, they're giving up a lot to come here. And so we look at certain people, and this is a real story. I learned of a woman who came here. She is a doctor from her homeland. And I think it was Cuba, I'm not sure. And she cleans hotel rooms. And so anybody could lump her, right, into a category and not understand what she's coming from and what she gave up to be here, pursuing safety, pursuing difference. We talk about the American dream, and someone said to me one day, Toneille, you're living the American dream. And I said, I'm living my dream. It is not that I categorize my dreams as the American dream because my mother and father left a suburban neighborhood in Jamaica. They left a home that was nice. They left jobs. Both of them had them. Professional grade jobs. They had the 2 children. All we didn't have was a dog. We had a housekeeper. We brought her with us. We weren't rich, but my mom and dad came here and they drove one vehicle until I was in middle school. And when they got a second one, it was old too. They worked hard. They raised us. Sometimes we didn't even know how much they struggled to feed us at points. We ate every day, but we didn't know that there were moments when my mom stood there and was like, what am I going to give my kids? and a neighbor showed up with fish. You know, so they didn't have to leave what they left, but they chose to. And they struggled and, you know, raised us really beautifully. But you don't know the backstory. So I want people to kind of expand their minds and think about the fact that that person has a backstory, an origin story.
There's so much of what you're sharing that, you know, I'm wanting to follow up on the stories, but then I'm like, oh, but what about the philosophical implication of this and then the practical? And like, there's so many directions I want to go with this. And I appreciate you kind of laying it all out there for discussion. One of the things I kind of want to launch into is anxiety versus fear. When we're afraid of a thing, we know what we're afraid of.
Okay.
When we're anxious, it's sort of this elusive, I always imagine that wonderful comedy classic, The Three Amigos, where they inadvertently kill the invisible swordsman. And I kind of think of anxiety that way. You don't know which way to aim because you don't know where it's coming from. Anxiety is a much harder thing to deal with than fear. Because if there's fear, I have an antidote. It's called courage. I'm afraid of that thing, but I can accept that thing, courage. And you can even get your young child who's afraid of something to be like, well, what's the worst that could happen? You decatastrophize, you do something, and then courage comes upon them because they can handle the outcomes of that. I feel like one of the biggest things that makes everything happening in our society right now, but also to bring it home, even here at Family and Children's, we've had to battle so much uncertainty. Literally on our billboard outside, we put, we're open to serve you. Why? Because people all over the internet were thinking we weren't open. And if they were thinking we weren't open, they were thinking help wasn't available. And like that sort of uncertainty feels like the anxiety provoking that whether it is as an organization or as an individual, anxiety is one of the biggest byproducts that is cutting across all political sensibilities. It's just there's so much uncertainty. People don't know what's safe and what isn't, what they can do and what they can't. And it's not about, well, you're safe as long as you're not this. It's that anything could cause anything. It's what it feels like.
Yeah. We're unmoored in so many ways.
Yeah.
I really love that you break down anxiety versus fear that way. When I'm feeling anxious, for me, it's almost like a buzz. And I know, okay, I need to ground. I need to put my feet on the carpet or...
You're anchoring in some way.
I need to turn off the noise for a moment. I've been overstimulated. So I really have tuned into that. And it's interesting, I'm thinking, with the circumstances that are out there, is it that I've been in fear or anxiety or both or at any given time? You know?
I mean, I think so much of it is if you can ask yourself what's the worst that can happen and come up with some things and in coming up with those things saying, is that okay? You may have turned a broad anxiety into a fear. And that fear is better than the anxiety because the anxiety is anything could happen, everything can happen, it's all out there. The fear is, well, if this happened, I'd do this. If this happened, I'd do this. So in some regards, I feel like the task in front of us all is to collectively shape what could happen and how we would or will respond to those moments because that makes that anxiety the fear. And a fear is not great, but it's better than just being wildly untethered.
Scenario planning, if you will, right? So I do have a question. I want to ask you what you think about this. Years ago, I did a teaching about fear. And I kind of observed, you remember the tsunami that we had several years ago that was just so catastrophic? Not we, but was abroad. I feel like animals have a really great instinct, right? We know that. And they use their fear in really unique ways. They sense it and they move, right? They don't get paralyzed from what I've observed. They move higher ground, they get out of the way. And I think fear can be for us a really unique propellant to higher ground and higher notions of things and to strategies that, as you say, are more useful than this kind of frenzy that we're in. So that's kind of how I think about fear sometimes and talk about it, is that it can be a propellant to better and to more kind of to tactic, if you will.
I think that holds because, again, it's not that being afraid of a thing makes us suddenly fine, but if we can put shape to a thing, then we might have a set of circumstances we could discuss and deal with the shared parameters versus this just sort of like the dark. I'm afraid of the dark.
Yeah.
Well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Turn on a light?
Yeah.
Wow, now you can see things, you don't need to be afraid of that object, or that object. And the fear is in many ways what encapsulates the unknown. And I think that is one of the things that, to cut broadly, is the most challenging about everything happening in our society, in our state, in our country right now, is not even just they're talking about this versus that versus the other. It's the constant barrage of uncertainty that hits everybody, from 4-year-olds
Yes.
who have got here and don't know that they're safe, to everyday folk who are running organizations and trying to maintain stability for people while dealing with uncertainty themselves.
100%. And you just said something. It's a barrage. It doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It's been so constant. And that's strange. That has to be doing something to us. Like you mentioned, our attention or our brains being impacted by social media and the onslaught there. All of these circumstances, from COVID, even before that to now, has to be doing something to us.
Yeah.
There's no reprieve.
I'm aware that I'm having this conversation in ways in which, in the back of my head, I'm trying to make sure that this conversation doesn't come across as a political statement, because I don't want it to. But that's the world we're in. Like, even as the head of an organization, no one is immune from, like, what can I say, what can't I? It's a pretty chilling feeling to have, to be honest.
Yeah. It is. I'm pretty outspoken in my personal life, right? I have talked with you a lot about never speaking for this agency, even as I'm aware that I'm an ambassador for this agency, right? So, I do public speaking and that kind of thing. So when I'm on a stage, many times I will make reference to being at a world-class organization. I may not name it, but it's kind of like you go out and you want to make mom and dad proud. You're a reflection on them. I know that I'm a reflection on this agency for those who can identify me with it. So that's been kind of a tension for me, is what do I say, where and when? Because I have opinions. I mean, we all do. But I have a responsibility also to make sure that we can continue doing what we're doing, and that I never put this organization in a place of risk and challenge. But I think overall, my intention is always to focus on humanity, right?
Your vibe, both in this conversation and from knowing you for a year now is not someone who comes across as confused about their identity, who they are. You are direct, you are open, you share who you are. Yes, opinions come out of your mouth, but also so does a general sense of, here's who I am.
Yeah.
4-year-old comes over, is
Yeah.
told they're mispronouncing things, the vulnerability. Draw a line for me, personality, experience, whatever. Draw a line from that 4-year-old who comes to a country not knowing what they're getting into, and the person today who outwardly appears comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
What's the line? How do you help me connect those?
That's a great question. I think I was always comfortable and grounded in me because I was in a family that helped me with that, right? And so I just want to tell you a little bit about the family very quickly.
Sure.
I mentioned the nuclear family that I have, but my mom and dad are both preachers' kids, right? And they were known in the Caribbean. Their fathers were very well known. So they were the first to marry. They have large families. My dad's from 4, my mom's from 6. All of my aunties and uncles, their siblings and their spouses know each other. Knew each other, because many have passed away. I grew up in this family where if we had a loss on one side, the other side came to support. If we had a happy time, they all converged. And so I'm the eldest grandchild on both sides. So I was surrounded by that on the island. And then coming here, my parents continued that. They put us on the phone with aunties, uncles, grandparents when everyone was overseas. And then as folks gravitated stateside, our house was kind of the entry point for a lot of our family. So very grounded in that home. And then I mentioned this wonderful conglomerate of international friends and friends here in America, from America, that we had. So that, I think, helped to solidify who I am. I've always been very driven. Like I had a goal when I was a little girl, I was going to be an attorney. That's what I wanted to do till I went to law school and didn't love it. And just found my way into education and now here. So I think that helped me a lot. So grounding in family, a faith tradition, also just lots and lots of laughter and joy. I would say to you that questions about myself, my identity, my fit weren't so much in my youth. They've come around more as I've aged because of constantly, like I said, being in that in between. So I'm pondering things like, do I want to retire stateside? Because I'm, again, a Gen Xer. So you start thinking about retirement. You start thinking about, I never had kids. I never got married. You start thinking about your elder years and like, what do I want those to look like? Where do I belong? When I'm in social spaces, I'm a little less comfortable sometimes. I have to gear up to go into social spaces when I didn't used to. And I think some of that also might be the COVID isolation and working remote for many years, and not being just as social as I used to be. But really, Adam, at the core of me, I'm always really clear. I'm a Jamaican-born, Jamaican person, raised here. So I have sensibilities of being an Okie, right? But just somebody who really embraces the world and always was able to do that because that's what I saw. So that's a very long-winded answer. I don't know if it gives you a good kind of perspective, but the exposure I had, the grounding I had, the love I had.
It seems almost as if the question was not, how did you get to be comfortable with your own identity? Maybe the question was, what happened over time in society? It's a rhetorical question, such that the 4-year-old who didn't think twice about claiming their identity got to the point in time at which identity became a thing to be defended. It's more rhetorical than anything, but it seems like maybe the question should be in reverse, because I almost discern less questions, despite the stories you told of people judging you when you're young, less questions then than now about identity.
Exactly. I think because also some of that foundation has left with elders passing away, with my friend group changing. There was a norm that I had. And a lot of that has shifted. And I think that happens to all of us, right? Over time, as you age, things change. So because, again, I never married, I never had kids, like that was my world. Those folks were my center. I mean, I just think that some of that has shaken me a little bit. Not to mention just the circumstances we've been talking about. Right?
Let me shift gears again, if it's okay. Your title at Family and Children's, what's your title?
Executive Vice President of Culture and Engagement.
Culture and Engagement. What is that, and what is the way in which you embrace or interpret that role?
Absolutely. Culture and engagement really is just a creative way, right, to embrace and discuss matters of inclusion, matters of equity, matters of how are we hearing our staff and their needs, and hopefully being able to take some of what they're offering us about their experience in their work, to continue things that are going well, to edit what's not, to innovate and start things that we need to. Like, I like to talk about stop, start, keep, tweak. I do a lot of that assessment.
I haven't heard that. What is that? I don't know that saying.
I borrowed that from a former boss that I had who said to me, hey, let's kind of do an analysis. What do we need to stop? What do we need to start doing? What do we need to keep doing? And what do we need to tweak or edit? And I use that a lot when I'm thinking about culture and engagement work. Culture is a broad term. We think about the iceberg model of culture, which you see things above the surface and there's a whole lot else that's below the surface that creates culture. We're talking traditions, we're talking language, we're talking expectations, we're talking about, the vibe, we're talking about mission, we're talking so many different things.
It's bigger than ethnicity, it's bigger than something like that.
Absolutely.
It can be a collective.
Absolutely. And so, if you ask me my role in a nutshell, it is to be able to see, hear, include, assess, right? and make sure that what's happening here is something that allows our staff to feel good about the work that they're doing, feel included and heard and supported in supporting our clients.
And culture is something, it's so ironic to me that we all want a good culture, but it's so ill understood, even in 2025, what makes a good workplace culture. What do you think makes a good workplace culture?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things we always look for is a lot of action, a lot of innovation in the workspace. Sometimes you got to know when not to take new action, when to pause. So being able to be very discerning, agile, right? I think that what makes a good workplace is when you are able to see that we serve and support each other here. So I said this term earlier, but when I worked at Hilti, one of the terms that we used was internal customers. Here we use clients. So if we look at each other like each other's clients, how do we approach each other, right?
Yeah.
I think that we are able to be curious in a great workplace culture. One of the things that I like, and this is not my saying, is to say seek understanding before seeking to be understood. Maybe I'm not always great at that, but I think if you lead with curiosity, that can inspire and inform a healthy culture. I think trust has to be at the foundation. So when we come in our workplace, why is it sometimes that there's such, not necessarily particular to this workplace, but why is it that there can be a lack of trust in any workplace? What are you afraid of? What do you think someone can take away from you? Why do you think you need to compete? You know, thinking about all of those things sometimes in the workplace can be helpful. When I come into my workplace, I know that I have a job to do. I'm competing against me. And the way that I feel is that if anyone can unseat me or outdo me, maybe that's not my seat anymore. That might sound very cavalier, but really, I'm always competing against me. And so, you know, those are just a few tenets, but fun and joy also, mission focus.
It strikes me, going back to what you're talking about with trust. Well, of course, trust would presuppose safety, and actual safety and perceived safety, which both need to be present, right? Because are you safe? Sure. Do you feel safe? No. That's a standard of any relationship, whether at work or at home. And I think that that's part of that elusive fabric that belongs to us all, but for which we can set a tone. And what are the things that, to get more practical, when you think about your job, EVP of Culture and Engagement, all right, Toneille, go get everybody feeling engaged and good about the culture.
Yeah.
What are the things you feel like you actually have influence on versus those things for which the most would be to communicate that this is up to all of us? I mean, what are those things that you think you can actually influence or are actually influencing from your position?
Yeah, great question. I model things. One of the things that I think I model is curiosity, right? Challenging fear-informed leadership and fear-based leadership. So there are ways that we can lead by instilling fear, or that we lead fearfully, which can inform us leaning back from our responsibilities, because I just can't do that.
Sure.
Okay, so I challenge that. I don't want people to be afraid of me. If we have to have an authentic conversation, I want them to know that it's about the matter at hand. It is not an attack on them or their character. So I think that clear communication, two-way communication are things that are helpful. Really, people want to feel heard. And that doesn't always mean you agree. It means I hear you. We can have a dialogue about it. And if I don't agree, how can I present that to you in a way that you can hear it and it's non-threatening and it doesn't shut you down, so you never come back again with your ideas? So I try to inspire people to share their ideas. I talk a lot to my team about being visionary leaders and asking them what their notion is about their work. What are they passionate about? What are they dreaming about? So that they don't just think about task. Now that's comfortable for some people. I used to work that way, but I had to be pulled out of it as I increased in my leadership responsibilities over time. I was trained out of this. Okay. So I'm trying to ask them to invest in sharing with me what their vision is for their area of responsibility. That exudes trust when you can say that to people. I think also simple things. Sometimes if I'm responding to emails at midnight, that means they think they have to do the same. And no matter how much I say, don't do this, they don't hear that. They watch the example. So I think about what I'm modeling. Honesty and transparency without challenging discretion, because I think there's a time and a place.
Sure.
Those are some things that I have modeled.
I know we've ranged a lot of different places. I kind of want to return to what's happening in the world right now, and where are we heading in terms of what is it we need to be preparing for? How much longer do you think this is all going to go? It certainly seems like we can't stay in this space forever, especially as we are all trying to collectively recover from this first barrage of uncertainty. How do we get normalcy? Like at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about the ways in which you go and embrace normalcy, not despite, but because of all these things that are so abnormal. So in other words, you go find things that create a sense of normalcy in your life. Does that not feel like you're denying all the horrible crap happening if you go and do something you enjoy and embrace that?
That's been a tension, but no, it does not. It does not. A 4-hour spa experience is not going to take away what I'm coming back to in the headlines, right? The way for me to stay well so that I can be effective and try to make a difference is to do things like that. Now, when I completely detach and avert my eyes and deny all that's going on, for me, that is unhealthy. That to me is irresponsible for me. I'm speaking for me, particularly as a leader and as a community member, as a human being. So those moments of, taking a pause to take care of yourself are necessary and fair. We have one life to live.
Yeah.
And it is the most unusual kind of season that I've had in my life, I think. And the way to sustain is to take those moments of reprieve.
And I'm purposely asking you as the individual who, as you said at the beginning, as an immigrant whose identity is affected by the discourse.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you as an expert, even though you are, because you're not a mental health expert as a trained person. You are someone who works in this field, but whose training and background is in other areas. So when I say to you, how have you found to deal with this? In one sense, I would think it would carry even more weight, because a mental health expert may say, well, do this, well, plug in from that. And if you can't afford a spa, then you can still do this. And if your kid, a person that was giving lots of tips would give those tips. But going back to you who is living with that fear and with that uncertainty, I feel like how you're dealing with this and how you deal with the notion that this is feeling like some open-ended uncertainty. How is Toneille looking ahead to that without getting so flooded and overwhelmed that you just want to, or maybe it is just about that. Like, how do you look forward?
Carefully, cautiously. So, for example, I was thinking about where can I take a little trip, right? I thought, okay, should I go back to Jamaica for a visit? Should I go to Puerto Rico? Where should I go? Should I go to California? And I paused it and said, I don't know if I want to cross any international borders right now. Puerto Rico is not international, but I still don't know what will happen when I come back to the mainland. So I'm grappling with the future. I'm grappling with my sense of safety. I think one way for me, it's going to sound really strange, to think about the future is to get really present. Because if I think too much about the future, it's defeating and deflating to me because there's so much uncertainty. So I'm not planning too far ahead.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going day by day, moment by moment, and really enjoying my work. Like I came in today excited, newly, where I have been a little unsure and concerned and like, am I doing the right things? Am I meeting the mark for me in this role? Am I doing what I need to do for our staff? And I came back today and I felt really assured. So even that moment is one that helps me to get to the next. The moments of music, the moments of touching center help me to get present, reframe, and look maybe a little bit further down the road to Friday. It may not be 10 years.
I'm wondering, we talk moment by moment, if you could share a story, you put it on social media some months ago, about an individual who you speak Spanish with in the workplace. You know, could you tell that story a little bit? Because I want to kind of come back to that. But it was both a beautiful and heartbreaking story, and something that I think applies in this context of this conversation.
Sure. Someone that I see often, an older lady, Latina, who I will have quick exchanges in Spanish with. And one day I saw her and I spoke to her and I said, hello to her. And she responded in English. And I'd noticed she'd been responding to me more and more in English. So in Spanish, I said to her, no más me hablas en español. I said, you're not speaking to me in Spanish anymore? And she kind of looked down and I said, in Spanish, I know times are hard. And I did this. And she smiled and we left each other's company, and she said goodbye to me in Spanish at that point.
What was your interpretation of why she didn't want to speak Spanish to you?
My interpretation, because I saw it over time, was potentially fear on her part, that she'd be identified, maybe singled out. And I don't know anything about her backstory, but I just took from that she was maybe afraid to speak because she didn't know who I was. Yeah. She doesn't know who's around her. So
I hesitate to over-engineer this sort of closing of our conversation, but one of the things I just can't help but keep thinking about is at the beginning, we were talking about what happens when someone looks out over a sea of children and they're actually less likely to donate to their food fund if they see a human, they see a picture. And I kind of go back to this lady and I'm thinking, okay, what we want to do, I find it very, very overwhelming to think about what we can do to get large-scale systemic change and get everybody more open and less afraid. And it just gets so overwhelming to think, how are we going to get everybody to relax and trust each other more? But the end of that story, tell me again, at the end of that conversation, she spoke to you in Spanish again.
Yeah, she said gracias, she said adios. After I said, I know times are hard. And, we could say that my assumption was just that. It was an assumption. This comes from kind of years of experience of being a non-native Spanish speaker who will go into spaces and try to speak, and people are very accommodating and want to speak with me and will invite me in and have those conversations, even when my Spanish was rough and poor. And when I noticed that we'd had those exchanges and she wasn't doing that time over time, and with the client, it just made me.
And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm a little overwhelmed if I need to start speaking Spanish to people because I don't know Spanish. But what does feel manageable, what doesn't feel overwhelming to me, is the notion that in small spaces and in small encounters, I could see people better, I could listen better, and I could give them space, if not invite them into space.
Absolutely.
And I think that feels way more manageable to me than global societal change.
You start with one, and there are ripples. You start with one.
And on that note, I do want to sincerely thank you for coming in here to share your story. Because again, as you noted, your story could be relatable to some and to others not so much. And you have privilege that some don't as they're facing the same fear. At the same time, if someone with privilege doesn't come in and tell their story, the people who are so terrified of what would happen if they told theirs, the story never gets told. So some of us have to lean into this, even as we know that we are leaning into it from a position that is perhaps less vulnerable than the next person, thus our ability and willingness to tell the story. And your willingness to come in and tell your story, which I know is so intensely yours, was something that occurred to you. And I just really appreciate you coming in and sharing, and want to give you some time here if there's anything you want to still share or kind of wrap up with.
Yeah, thank you for the space and just taking me on this journey in conversation. It's a privilege, Adam, to be here and to be on the team and to be able to see our people, to give them space, to hear them, and try to support them, even if I can't always fix it or always agree, just to give them that space to be seen and heard.
And I think when we talk about seen and heard, you sort of naturally called yourself an Okie earlier.
I did.
Or you're an Okie.
I'm a Okie, right? So there are so many things that are so uniquely kind of a mashup, right? There are things in my speech that are very distinctly Jamaican still, or traditions that I hold. But I've been in Tulsa since I was almost 4 years old. There's no way that this city didn't rub off. I told this story, if we have a moment, recently, where I said that my one dream was to leave Tulsa at any cost when I was in high school. And at the time, I was introducing the mayor at the Pinnacle Awards. And I said that, 30 years hence of graduating college, in fact, when I'd had an opportunity to go to Dallas to study, I am so grateful that I didn't leave. I've been able to build a beautiful life here. I love my life. When I was traveling a lot for work, in and out of the city, I would land and I'd say, I'm home. There's a piece of me that can never go back to Jamaica, and yet there's a piece of me that's still there. So when I go there and I visit, I touch it and I come back. So I'm between these worlds all the time. But this is a very special city and place, and it's formed me too.
It is so special, and I think one of the things that makes it so special, Toneille, is an immigrant and an Okie can be the same person.
Yes.
And I thank you so much for being here and making Tulsa and Oklahoma a better place.
Thank you.
And everything you're doing, and for coming here today and visiting with us.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.